So I think the upcoming free agent that I left off on in the last vid was Bogdan. I don't remember pointing out the idea of the Kings re-signing him, so I will say that now. That could always happen, because his salary is going to be interesting and what teams view him as and what the Kings view him as and whether he wants to be there. Anyway, let's move on to Marcus Morris, unrestricted. For the Knicks, he has been their best player this season, and he is perhaps playing himself into something in the teens. I mean, he's getting paid $15 million this year. The one thing that alarms me with Marcus is only 28% of his two-pointers have been assisted, which makes me fear that his perfect world might just be a whole lot of ISOs and elbow jumpers and jab steps and stuff, which we can argue about whether that actually makes your team better, even if he's been pretty alright for the Knicks. But, that being said, he's going to end up somewhere, we assume. And if he was on a team with more playmaking, then perhaps he could play within a system and it'd be alright. I'll admit, the team I actually thought of for him was the Hawks. I mean, the reason to not take him on is they're building up Cam and DeAndre and Herter and whoever else along the wing positions. But if you want somebody who can play off of Trae Young and consistently make shots and occasionally give you something off of ISOs and also be a respectable defensive player, well, there you go. And you might not have to give him an insane amount of money. I mean, if Marcus, let's just say on a different team, he's averaging 15 points a game, making threes, playing solid defense, occasionally is a little annoying when he tries to do his own thing, but usually he's alright. And you're paying him like $14 million a year, or maybe a little higher than maybe 16, 17, depending on your salary situation and how many years you sign him to. Okay, that could be a solid enough signing for somebody. Now, of course, Marcus Morris could also be traded before the deadline in a week or two, whatever it is. The Knicks could, of course, keep him. I mean, they've got a bunch of guys they're going to decline. But maybe Morris could be the one dude they keep. But with him, they'd have to actually re-sign him, and then you're getting into bidding wars, and it'll just be interesting to see Marcus Morris's value. Is there a chance that he would be more coveted than, well, our next guy, Demar Derozan? Because, I mean, yeah, DeRozan's probably better than Morris at the end of the day, but if Morris is going to cost you a lot less and he's not going to take over your offense as much, I'm just saying. Now, if we get to DeMar DeRozan, I think his future is still one of the more confusing ones because of obvious reasons with him, the lack of great spacing, and his defense has never really amounted to anything, and his playmaking has gotten better, but it's not to the point where he's like a one-man show on offense, you know? So it's like, well, okay, we can argue about whether DeRozan actually makes you better or not, and there's varying opinions on that throughout the NBA world. So what does that mean for him as a free agent? I mean, there's a chance he just accepts his player option and we're not having this conversation for another year. But if he does decline that, then I mean, you just go down the teams that have cap space. It's Atlanta. I wouldn't really think they'd want DeRozan. I don't know if he would be as good playing off of Trae Young and Collins as somebody like a Marcus Morris could be. Unless you're just way higher on DeRozan than I am. Memphis, I don't think DeRozan really lines up with what they're doing. Cleveland, I mean, maybe if they were just desperate to get somebody in there to help him be better right now, but again, I don't know if DeRozan's just going to change everything in the world of the Cavaliers. With Charlotte, you already got a crowded backcourt with Devontae and Rozier. I don't think he really fits in on the Pelicans. The Raptors, if they let a whole bunch of dudes go, could they re-sign DeRozan? Sure. Do we picture that happening? I don't think so. And then before you know it, you're looking at either the Knicks, which, you know, the Knicks giving DeRozan a whole lot of money might be the most Knicks thing ever. And then eventually you're hitting the teams that aren't too far away from the salary cap unless they make a couple of drastic moves. So DeRozan's free agency is just going to be really weird. But again, this is all if he declines his player option, which he could. Maybe he views himself as a max guy, and I mean, the NBA is weird. Maybe he ends up getting a max from one of these teams. Maybe it's another sign and trade, because there is a chance that sign and trades are going to be more of a thing moving forward, because it happened a couple times this previous offseason. Jimmy and D'Angelo Russell being the two big ones, I think. And then if that's the case, then really anybody could get any free agent at that point, you know? Sign and trades really make this impossible to predict, but we'll have to see if that's a trend or if it isn't. But the reason I bring it up is because DeRozan's thing, it just really confuses me about what ends up happening with his career. If we move on to Gallo, similar to Marcus Morris, could just get traded this season and re-signed, but it seems like OKC is deciding that they're going for it a little bit here. And I don't think they're too far away from really putting themselves in the mix in the middle of the Western Conference, if they're not already there, by just making a couple of small moves. But apparently, the Mavs and the Sixers have asked about Gallo. That's just from a quick Google search, so I don't know how much life those really have. I feel like what OKC decides to do with a Gallo could be the sign of what they want to do over the next few years. I mean, I think I've said this before. Between Shea apparently being a future star, because the dude is really going nuts this season, on top of all of the picks they have, they don't really have to tear this down. I mean, they can be a respectable team while using those picks for various things and hoping Shea can just keep getting better. So if that's the case, you could just re-sign Gallo, because they are pretty far away from the luxury tax. After this season, I should say. Because the luxury tax is projected to be $140 million for the 2020/2021 season. It's only going to go up from there, and they're at like 103 once they get off of Robertson's contract, and we'll see what happens with Nerlens Noel and stuff. So, I mean, they could just re-sign Gallo, probably, and just roll with this team for a couple of seasons, or at least extend it by 1 year and see how far they can go into the postseason. So Gallo's situation's a little tough, similar to DeRozan's. The difference is I think Gallo would have more of a market because of his three-point shooting. Now, Gallo's injury stuff is still probably a concern. I mean, he's been healthy enough this season, and he was pretty good last year. He played 68 games, but 21 the year before that, and he's missed a lot of time in his career, so that's still a little frightening. In terms of teams that could be cool for Gallo, I mean, pretty much all the ones I'm mentioning. I think Atlanta could make some sense. The Knicks, once again, okay. Toronto is another one. I mean, I do think Gallo would probably get a little bit more money than Marcus Morris would, unless the health really freaks teams out. For what it's worth, the advanced stats love Gallo. Like, they would suggest that he's actually a lot better than we would think he is, and I think everybody's already pretty positive on the guy, so for whatever that's worth. If we keep going, Mike Conley, I would assume he accepts his player option, because with his performance so far, I highly doubt he's going to get $32 million in the open market. Or $34.5 actually, because it goes up a little next season. Millsap is another interesting one, because I think he's pretty essential to the Nuggets, especially on defense this season. But, of course, a lot of teams would love to have the guy. Yeah, he's getting older, but he seems to be pretty good at maintaining what he does. I mean, I don't think he's drastically worse than a few years ago. I mean, he scores a few less points, I'll give you that much, but he's still a pretty solid all-around guy. And for whatever it's worth, his three has been a little better. He keeps himself in shape, all that stuff. I think the one difference between Denver keeping Millsap and other teams wanting him is Denver seems pretty okay with giving him a whole lot of money on shorter contracts. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if they gave him like $50 million for 2 years or something, whereas other teams might be like, do we really want to commit to that? But I think when Denver signed him, they envisioned him being a percentage of their salary even past the initial contract, and because of how valuable he's been for them, even if the box score numbers are not crazy, I do feel like he would end up staying. unless they viewed that as their one way of getting Michael Porter Jr. more minutes, which I would disagree with them on. I think there are many things they could do before getting rid of Millsap to accommodate MPJ. And I also don't think Jeremy Grant has been good enough for them to let go of Millsap just yet. So that's the second of these videos. You know, this free agent class, it's not loaded in terms of stars, but there are a lot of good players. So even after Millsap, we've got Evan Fournier, Davis Bertans, Ibaka, Joe Harris, Tristan Thompson. I mean, Goran Dragic is even down here, Marc Gasol. So yeah, there's definitely like at least one, maybe two more videos I can do out of this. And yeah, we're getting through to the deadline, man. I'm hoping for the sake of content, we get a few nice moves at the deadline, because until then, we're talking about Evan Fournier for 3 minutes in the next vid.